Hi guys, I'm Jack Wins and today I'm going to take you through my track Tears of Joy. I'm going to tell you how the track came about, how I put it together, dissect the breakdown and the drop by going through the bass, the drums, the chords, the vocal processing, the melodies. So let's get started. So basically, the way I normally work when I produce tracks or write tracks is often where a songwriter comes to the studio here, or I go to songwriting camps, and start with some basic chords, write lyrics together, and then I'll take it here into the computer and produce a track around it. And other times I might get a top line or an a cappella, and then I'll write a track from scratch around it. This time I got sent a demo from an A&R, and I really liked the basic concept of it in the breakdown with the chords and the vibe overall I really liked with the vocals. And it kind of inspired me to come up with the drop that you'll hear in a minute. It's really quite dark and moody, and it has a male vocal, which I haven't really done before, which I really liked the challenge of. So what I'll do is I'll play a bit of the original demo so you get an idea of what it originally sounded like. And then I'll play the finished product of what I made out of it. And then we'll start dissecting the track. Then we'll start with the breakdown. So here's a little bit of the original demo.
I want you to cry, tears of joy, all over me, all over me. I just want you to cry, your tears of joy. All over me, all over me. I just want you to cry and hold me through the night. Just wanna be the everything you need. So won't you cry, your tears of joy. All over me, all over me, all over me.
So that's the original demo. I really liked the idea of the breakdown and the vocals and kind of like these kind of arpeggiator sounds and nice pads. But I really didn't like the drop of it or the idea of it. So I was like, okay, cool. Let's develop the original idea of the breakdown and try to come up with a drop that's more current and that I think represents kind of the vibe of the breakdown, I guess. I also pitched it up slightly, which I thought suited a little bit better. So let me play you a little bit so you get an idea what it sounds like now.
I want you to cry, tears of joy, all over me, all over me. I just want you to cry, your tears of joy, all over me, all over me. I just want you to cry and hold me through the night. Just wanna be the everything you need. So won't you cry, your tears of joy, all over me, 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 all over me.
So that's basically the kind of the drop that I came up with. So let's start going through the actual breakdown first and kind of dissect it, what it consists of. So let's start with the pads. Play a little bit for you. Now, I don't know how many of you guys know, but there's this massive kind of trance classic called Energy 52 Café Del Mar, which I absolutely love. And these pads are kind of a little bit based on that. So when I heard the chords originally, like, oh cool, yes, this kind of vibe. So I tried to kind of recreate it to kind of give it this kind of old school vibe. So I got a couple of layers. I got a serum, which kind of slightly distorted. So all I've really put on it is a camel fat, a bit of tube distortion, a bit of EQing, nothing special. And as you can hear, I use a filter by Simplon to kind of, or FAB filter, to kind of slowly start opening it up. And then at the same time, I have the cutoff opening up. So as the sound kind of progresses and as the vocal progresses, when you start building towards when the bass line comes, it's opening up and the sound's becoming bigger. So it's kind of, you build this kind of, I guess, big drama basically throughout the track, and you kind of a big build up towards the big changeover basically. So you have the Serum doing that, and I got VPS Avenger kind of doing the same. It's a pad string, and again I got the cutoff opening up. Again, not much processing, just a camel fat on it. Then I got another layer, the silent, also with cutoff, and another VPS. And the sounds individually probably don't sound that impressive, but it's all about, for me, about layering. I'm not someone that does a lot of sound design, but I like to layer to kind of create one overall big sound, because you kind of create something unique. But it's very important when you layer that you have a clear idea of what each sound does. There's no point just layering for the sake of it, but you might want to have a sound that feels more the high end, something that feels more the mid range, something that gives a bit of grittiness. So I'll add all the layers together so you can hear it. And then overall, I've done a bit of saturation on it. Got the helper saturated on it, and the FAB filter Saturn. The faster master preset just on 46%. Bit of EQing, nothing, just kind of take a little bit of out of the 200 range. And then I got a bass clap, easy washout, which is like a big reverb builder, and then the FAB filter Simplon again. So that's kind of building up together. Then I got pad 2 that does this. So you bring it together, it sounds like this. And then I have also the ARP, the slow ARP doing this. And again, it's multiple layers. Again, there the filter is kind of opening up with all the sounds, and I think the release as well, just to kind of go alongside with the pads to open everything up and make it kind of into this big moment. So you got this layer, which is the TK Insomni plug from F9 Samples. I presume it's kind of based on Insomnia from Fabulous. Then I got this layer, the JP8 square plug, VPS, which is kind of a bit more darker, and then this sound, which is a bit more trancey. And as you can see with the MIDI, that it first starts low, and then towards the end it actually goes up. And again, that's another thing, another little trick to create a bit more drama and subconsciously for the listener, like keep kind of engaged, because there are constantly little things changing. There might not be obvious stuff, but altogether it keeps the listener engaged and tells the listener, okay, something's happening here. It's building up to this big moment. So when you put that all together, we got the bass as well. Let's do that as well. The bass, I got a respace, which is a sample. I think I bounced it down. Just a bit of EQing on it. Bass 1 is a sample. And what I always like in the sense about Ableton, it's very easy to transpose. So when you click on it, you can transpose here to the right key. So I often do that. I'll find a sample of a nice sub bass or another bass, and I just lay it out like this, and then just transpose it into the right melody. I often use a sample for the sub to make sure it's like a solid wave sound basically. And then I don't have to do too much processing on as well. I prefer on sub bass as well not to do too much processing, because you want to keep it warm. There's already going to be processing during the mastering stage. You don't want to end up losing too much low end by processing it too much. So the low end is this, the sub. Just done a bit of EQing on it. Just taking all the, well, there's not much there anyway, but took a little bit out around the 200 range. Then bass 1 is a bit more mid. So I've put a little bit of tube distortion on it, bit of EQing, magic stereo to push it out to the side a little bit. Then I use the BX control to make sure that everything stays mono under 132 Hertz. It's very important to make sure that the low end, also with drums, everything is mono, to make sure it's very punchy and that it cuts through. I think that's about it. So when you then put them all together, let's do it layer by layer. So you got the re's, mid bass, and the low to give it the body. That's literally it. And then again the simplon to cut out the low end towards the end. Another little trick I've done towards the end of this part of the track, before it goes into the bassline build up, I've kind of put a transpose effect on the end of the bass. So it sounds like this. So it kind of feels like a vinyl stop. So the whole idea is you have this this kind of breakdown with the pads, with the lush pads and the arpeggiator and the vocal, and you create this real moment. But you want to tell the listener that things are going to start changing up and that the pace is going to pick up. So to kind of tell the listener that this part is finishing, you kind of have the effect sounds and the final stopper to kind of make it slow down, like, okay, this is finished, and now we're going to pick up with something new. A new kind of chapter in the track is happening. So when we have all these bits together, let's also quickly check the vocal. The vocal is already pretty much processed when I got it. This is kind of what it sounded like when I got it. Put a bit of CLA on it from waves, a bit of compression, a bit of treble, and a bit of stereo spreading on it. And then I added, so it sounds like this. Then the OTT. Just to make it a bit more crisper on the higher end. So anyway, let's play it all together. Maybe let's do it by layer. So that's basically it. That's pretty much the breakdown. And then the track moves on into this, the kind of the bass build up. Cool. So as you can hear, this is where the track kind of builds up, where the bass line gets introduced. Let's have a listen to what the layers are for here. One of the bass I bounced down, but it's actually the VPS Avenger push, which does this. Again, not much processing. I just put the camel fat on it with the tube distortion, bit of Mac, and then I put a bit crusher on it to make it a bit more crunchy. I also put on the overall bass a bit crusher, which I've done to send A. This gives it a bit more extra character. And then I got this bass sound, the Serum. So together it sounds like this. And then the sub, which, as I mentioned, I just used a sample for. I just put a multi-band compressor on it just to kind of control the low end a little bit. No other effects. That's literally it for the bass. Then we have a little string, a held string to kind of build the tension. Those two together. That's pretty much the build up, and then you got a snare roll, which consists of a couple of layers. Kind of one kind of tinny, one that gives the body, and one that's more like kind of has a snare with a release, kind of like a 909 snare. And all together that sounds like this. So we're now into the drop. We got obviously just before the drop starts, we got this little kind of melody, which I kept very dry. It's just a little melody that I've done, so literally 2 samples together. And this one. Kept it really dry, and yeah, I haven't actually done any processing really on it. It's just some EQing. The reason why I kept it really dry is because, again, you want to create this big contrast. You have this big build-up happening where there's a lot of reverbs happening. You kind of want to reset everything. So I kept it kind of dry and then just go into this drop. And again, with the drop, the bass, the drums are very dry because you want to have them really punchy. So then the melody and the horn that are kind of sitting on top, you make those kind of really wet to kind of create this contrast, because you want the horn and the melody to kind of fill the space in the mid-high frequency and have everything else kind of underneath there doing their thing. So without the horn and the melody, it sounds like this. Oh, need to turn it up. Then with the melody. And the melody is exactly the same as the little melody you just heard just before the drop. It's just a different sound. As you can hear, there's quite a long tail of the reverb. And it's basically a sample that I used, or just took from F9 that I just heard, like, oh, I really like the sound. Put the wow on it and a bit of reverb. And the wow is just more to kind of make it come through a little bit more. And then the other one is this one. Which sounds quite, I guess, quite EDM-y. Without anything on it, sounds like this. It's a bit like an 80s brass sound, I guess. I put the Camel Crusher Annihilate on it, or the preset Annihilate. A bit of EQing, because it creates quite a low-end noise. Reverb on it. And then OTT again to kind of compress it together to make sure that that kind of reverb just kind of continues. And then a sidechain at the end of it. The horn sound is this. Again, not that much processing. Just put, again, a Camel Crush under the tube warmth. And the Saturn basic compressor, which again, I kind of focus on the mid-high range to get it to cut through, because that's obviously the area where we want this sound to kind of stand out, because there's obviously enough going on in the low end anyway. I think that's pretty much it for the drop. Then the second part of the drop, we got a couple of extra layers coming in, some extra drums. So you have the kick, which consists of a couple of layers. Low end, top, and a clap. It's often when I do kicks, I often have one sample I use for the low end and one for the kind of mid-high range that focuses on the attack sound, and just kind of put them together. I don't really do any processing on it, as you can see, just a bit of EQing, and that's it. For the drums, there's not loads going on, just a ride. hi-hat fill, snare fill, then this loop. That's literally it. We obviously had the bass, and then on top of the bass, so let me just play the original bass again, which is like this. I added a harmony. Because obviously the track is developing, and you want to keep introducing some extra elements to kind of keep people or keep the listener engaged. So by adding that subtly, yeah, makes quite a nice difference. I basically got the bass harmony too, which are a couple of more layers, doing the same thing as the first bass harmony, but just again to make it cut through a little bit more. A couple of layers. Let's move this here. So it's a combination of a VPS, which is obviously a synth, a sample, another sample, and this sound is a little bit screechy. Again, like I was saying earlier, the sounds individually might not be that exciting or that interesting, but when you combine them together, it actually works well. Often when you find sounds, try to play it as part of the track, because sometimes you might have a sound that on its own doesn't sound that interesting, but when you actually play it in context of the track, it actually works really well. If you purely go off the sounds just because they sound really amazing on its own, yeah, that's great, but it might not actually be the kind of thing that's needed for the track. Initially, it might be cool, especially if you look for a bass sound or drums when you're just starting off the track. That's really important to get those sounds right, but when you start adding layers, you just want to make sure that each layer does something to add to the track. So that's kind of the second part of the drop. Then we go into the second breakdown, which is pretty much the same. The only thing that's really different is that there's a kick continuing to keep kind of, keep the track moving, because obviously you don't really want to, because it's a club track, you don't want to kind of bring everything back down again to, just things going really slow again. You kind of want to keep the track having a little bit of pace. So you can hear there's like a little filtered kick in it. I've added another ARP, this one, which I think is just a sample that I pitched. Yeah. Added again the reverb opening up. So yeah, there's nothing really else happening in the second breakdown. Often I think the things when you do the second breakdown, always add some extra little elements just to kind of keep it fresh. In one way, you want to make sure that the listener stays familiar with the track, because you obviously don't want to completely switch it up and people are like, well, what is happening here in the track? Like, be really surprised. You kind of want to continue the theme, but slowly add some elements to kind of keep people engaged. So in this breakdown, obviously, we added the kick to keep it going. We added this subtle arpeggiator to kind of move it forward, and then we come to the build up of for the second or the final drop, and the build up is pretty much the same. The only difference is that I've added this kind of siren, which sounds quite harsh. Again, the original sample sounds like this. Not the best sound, but I was looking for, I often like to use sirens. I used it when I did the collab with Mr. Bell the Weasel as well with One Thing. It is always nice to kind of fill up that space, and because the track is really moody and dark, it kind of felt right for me to add kind of a siren. So this is what the sound is without treatment. Got the low end out, Camel Crusher to make it really kind of growly, and then the reverb to make it sound big. And yeah, that's a really nice layer to it. I'll play 2 minutes of the drop. One thing I will say is, be mindful when you use sirens, especially in more commercial records. With the track One Thing, I remember that the producer of a big radio show for a US radio station came back to me and said, I really like this record. I would love to play it, but I can't have a siren in it. I was like, well, why can't you have a siren in it? Well, the listeners might think that the siren is going off somewhere and they might panic. So I would like to have the version, but without the siren. So actually I had to do that for him. So yeah, keep that in mind. But yeah, so with the extra siren layer, it sounds like this. And then the only extra layer is this, kind of like a bell sound. It's again quite subtle, but it just again brings a subtle little element to the listener. They're like, oh, what's this? They might not even notice it, but it just kind of, like I said, keeps it a little bit interesting and not sounding tired. Right, so the final thing I want to talk with you guys about is atmospheric sounds. So I always have these in my tracks. They're very subtle. They might not actually be that noticeable, but it just gives that final finishing touch to the track that make it, yeah, I guess a little bit different from anyone else, and make it just, I guess, overall sound a little bit richer. So for instance, in the breakdown, when I play it, I'll play it with and without. Let's just first play it without. Be good if I actually do the drop. Let me take the second drop instead, because that's actually a bit more prominent. So I'll play it without. And I'll add them in. So as you can hear, there's kind of like this kind of slightly kind of like a choir boy kind of atmospheric sound. And I've also got this little texture. Very subtle, you don't really hear it, but as I just played in the track, it does kind of fill up a certain space in the kind of higher frequency, and it just makes it sound a little bit more interesting. Also in the build-up, I'll play another sound that I've added. Let me just take the vocals out so you can hear it. I've added this little vocal element, which is this. And it just kind of, as you'll hear it in a minute, it just kind of pushes through when the build-up happens. So when it goes in, so again, like I said, very subtle, but it just adds something to it. It drives the track forward, and it just fills this little area which often is kind of kept empty, I guess. And it's a little bit of the approach that you hear often with pop records. It's just that final finishing touch, the little subtle sounds here and there that make your track just, in that sense, I feel, kind of stand out as a real finished product. And yeah, I guess stand out from the rest, because ultimately there's so much music out there, so much great music out there, that those finishing touches, I feel, really can make a difference. Obviously the song itself needs to be great, but it's all about those finishing touches to make your record, I think, really stand out. So that was Tears of Joy. I hope it's been really helpful, and thanks for watching.